do you truly believe what you say you believe? And I am pretty confident that most of us do not believe what we say we believe. Because the evidence that we believe is that we act according to what we believe. I had to ask myself, and I discovered in myself that I did not. And I'll give you an example. Back in the day, when I was going through the difficult time in the restaurant, I would go to my mother whenever I was really going through a difficult time. And here's what would happen. I remember as I'm praying, I recall when I would go to mom and present the situation, the problem, I would walk away with tremendous peace. She got it covered. I'm praying and I'm walking away from my Lord and my God, the creator of the universe, my Father who already demonstrated his love for me beyond any demonstration. And I walk away with the same burden that I brought to him. And that changed my life. Do I truly believe what I say I believe? And I did not. Because I say that I trusted him, but I didn't. So that word trust is what changes everything. For us Christians, the life-changing question for all of us should be, do I truly believe what I say I believe? Is it yes with Jesus, all in, or not? There's no in between.
This is the Fit Investor Podcast, where we talk about how to live a more holistic life of being fit, not only financially, but physically and faithfully. We'll be joined by experts in all these areas to share their experiences and actionable and practical tips so that you can be a fit investor too. So now let's join our hosts, Cale Delaney.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Fit Investor. I'm your host, Cale Delaney, and today our special guest is Mr. Mario Padrino. And Mario is owner and chairman of Padrino's Cuban restaurants, family-owned and operated restaurants that have been serving South Florida since 1976. Mario is passionate about cultivating a company culture of integrity, respect, and excellence for Padrino's 5 restaurants located in South Florida. Outside of his work in the restaurant industry, Mario is a member of First Baptist Fort Lauderdale, where he volunteers his time as a lay pastor and leads several Bible studies, which is a role that is dear to his heart. He and his wife, Cookie, enjoy spending time together with their family, which includes 3 married children and 8 grandchildren, all of whom reside close to one another in Plantation, Florida. So with that, Mr. Mario, welcome to the Fit Investor.
Thank you for having me, Cale.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just for our audience, Mario and I had met at a CBMC, or Christian Businessmen's Connection meeting that he'd actually hosted at one of his restaurants. And he had given a bit of a speech there, and I thought it was very inspiring and encouraging. And so glad to have him on our podcast here to share that with you guys. Why don't we, like we talked about, why don't we just start from the beginning, Mario, and take us back to where it all began?
Very good. We came from Cuba in 1968. My mother, my sister, and I came from Cuba. My dad remained in Cuba. He came 4 years later. We came to the United States because my parents would say this, which, by the way, I never understood until later on that I became an adult. They said they came to the United States for us, the kids. As a child, I didn't know what the heck that meant until I became an adult. And I went back to Cuba some years ago and saw the difference of what my life would have been if I remained in Cuba as to what my life is currently in the United States. We came here again because my dad was a businessman in Cuba. When communism came, all that stuff went away because they take businesses and all that stuff away from you. And they had the courage to leave everything and come here. So we came in, like I said, in 1968. We were fortunate that when we got to the United States, we have family already. So other people came early on in the early 60s. They had the roughest of all the Cubans because they were starting from scratch. Not too many other people. We have family. So for me, it was a neat experience. But my dad came later. And then after working a couple of years as a janitor at a hospital, an opportunity came up to be part of owner in a grocery store business, which is what my dad did in Cuba. For most of his life, my dad was a businessman since he was a young guy in the grocery store business. So we got into the business and he was there 2 years. And then we moved down to South Florida because I tell people the American dream for Cubans is the American dream in South Florida because of the weather and all that stuff. Okay. The winter is not the American dream for us Cubans. It's South Florida. So we moved down here. And here's the crazy thing, Cale. My dad moved down here without a job, they were just moving down here. We're going to open up a business. There was no prior plan. It's not like he had a business already that he was going to do. So we moved down here to open up a grocery store. And when we come down here, they were already the mega Cuban grocery store. So there was no need for our stores. We had a tiny little thing, which was good up there in New Jersey, but not down here. We got into the restaurant business because an opportunity came up for a restaurant, not because that was the plan. It was just because that's what we needed to do. And that's how we ended up in 1976, starting our first restaurant in Hialeah. We didn't know anything about restaurants, but we were fortunate because the owners remained with us for a little bit and
Okay.
they gave us direction on how to do things. But again, the important thing is dad was a businessman all his life. So he was very savvy from the business side of the equation.
Mm.
And my mom was someone that had just a passion for excellence. So with business savvy and excellence, you could do a lot of stuff here. And that's how we got started. The first one in 1976. And then he was there working all the time. So we went to another restaurant, which was actually smaller than the first one, which was not a big restaurant. And the reason we went to the new restaurant is because we were closed one day a week, where the other one we were working 7 days a week. So we went to the little place. To me, it looked like we were going backwards because in that original place, very busy.
Mm.
The little place, not as busy. And it felt like we were going backwards. And I still remember specifically, my memories, by the way, there's certain things I remember, a lot of things I don't remember. But I remember one day I'm washing the dishes. I'm going to college, by the way, and washing dishes.
Mhm.
And I'm thinking, what the heck am I doing here? Okay. In this little hole in the wall place, washing dishes. And I'm going to college and washing dishes. And I still remember that because it reminded me like we were going backwards. As I moved forward, I realized I was not going backwards. That was the beginning of us truly learning from scratch how to do things. Because the other one, there was just already established, even though mom was involved, we had chefs, we have other people doing it. When we went to the smaller one, for the first time, my mother and my aunt had to do all the cooking. So I honestly consider that was almost the beginning of what we experience today. So by looking what it seemed to be a backward step, as I look back now, it's almost like the beginning a real step. Okay. So we do that. And then here's the crazy thing. We moved to Broward County because a customer said to my dad, there's a bunch of Cubans in Hallandale, and I think you should open up a restaurant there. My dad, my mother, and the lady, both my parents didn't speak English that much. My mother, a little bit, dad, none. By the way, dad came from Cuba when he was 58. He opened the first restaurant at 62.
Wow.
Okay. At 62. When we go to Hallandale Beach, because the lady says that there's a bunch of Cubans there and it should be a good place to open up a restaurant. So my dad goes with the lady and my mom. They're driving through Hallandale Beach Boulevard. There happens to be a restaurant, a small place that caught their attention. So dad tells the lady, look, we're going to go in there and tell the guy, this is through her because she doesn't speak English. Tell them that I heard he was selling the restaurant and that we were interested. The guy was actually selling the restaurant. He didn't, it just happened they was selling the restaurant.
Right.
And we end up in Hallandale, okay, because this woman said there's a bunch of Cubans there. What happened is I never even bothered to even correct or check if there were Cubans in Hallandale. Once I get to Hallandale, okay, this is 1981. There are no Cubans in Hallandale. There was not a single name because we had the white pages. So I'm going through the white pages. There's not a single Hispanic name in the whole thing. It's primarily Jewish people. And our primary food is pork. Okay. So it's like, what the heck? So it was the craziest thing. And here's what happened. At the end, I don't know if you remember, in 1980, the Mario boatlet happened, which was not a positive thing for Cubans because they were bringing Cubans. Cubans were coming from Cuba in boats, and Castro put a bunch of criminals, literally jail people, in those boats. So during that period, being a Cuban was a very negative thing. I've always been very proud of being a Cuban, except during that period. I always had to excuse myself. I'm not like those people, okay? I'm not like them. So we go to Hallandale, not a single Hispanic, Jewish people not eating pork during that period, which they can't stand Cubans. Okay. So imagine all that planning that went behind there. There's no planning over there, okay? We just did it based on that. But here's the lessons that I've learned from my parents. So here's the thing. We're clueless to all that. But here's the deal. My dad's savvy financially. My mother with excellence in food. Kale, that place was packed.
Really?
It took It was a little place, and no, this is no exaggeration. People would take longer waiting outside than actually eating.
Wow.
And why? Because of excellence. She was just about excellence. Okay. It was interesting how that all worked out, but wonderful lessons. I've been fortunate to experience what it took to be successful at a business. I grew up in it. By the way, I was going to school for accounting, and then I decided, no, I don't want to be an accountant because that whole business mindset of having your own business was so ingrained in my heart and my life. All my family members that came from Cuba, pretty much, which was my parents' generation, not mine. I think everybody owned their own business.
Hmm.
Everybody had their own business. No one was an employee. Everybody had their own business. Okay.
Interesting.
And that's why, by the way, that's why it breaks my heart when I hear people speak negatively about America. Kills me. It breaks my heart because we have experienced the goodness of America. We have experienced what America is all about. And what kills me is that a lot of people who have been born in this dark country, beautiful country, treated with such disrespect that they're clueless of what they're talking about.
Mhm.
We let communism, socialism, because we know what that looks like. And we came to this country and we experience what it is. It's not that somebody told us about it, the American dream. No, we have lived the American dream. We came with zero, not even the language. And every family member, honestly, Kale, they have done above average. Every single one. All of them. Anyway, so that's why I decided to go into the business world because that's in me. But here's what happened to me. I got into the business world when I was 21, like all in, 21. And think I told you guys there when I said it, but I say it for the crowd here. I liked it for about 3 months and hated it for about 9 years. It really was. And the reason why that happened is because I had all kinds of wrong expectations of what having a business should be like. I was a kid and I thought I'm going to be like the boss man. And in reality, you become a slave to the darn thing, not a boss man. That is something that I think most people who get into business do not realize at the beginning. Dad used to say something, and I actually checked it out, that is legit. All businesses, it takes a few years to get going. During that time, you got to do whatever it takes. Okay. And I thought we were beyond that part. I thought we were just going to be sliding through there. Okay. You got to do whatever it takes. And so my big thing was I learned from them all these things, but when you have to practice them on your own, it becomes a little more challenging and you got to really get into it. But the beautiful thing about that experience with my parents is that I truly saw them do whatever it takes. They literally would sleep in the restaurant multiple nights, many times, because we were still in Hialeah, living in Hialeah, and the restaurant was in Hallandale. So they would do this. So I saw that they were willing to do whatever it took, and they made it great.
Mm.
Now, when I took over, it was my mother and I. We moved to another restaurant in Hallandale, and it was a busier restaurant. But what happened that I learned there, and this is where I struggled, I had wrong expectations. I thought everything's going to be awesome, but it wasn't that awesome. The other part too, which was a sad thing, it's something very important for us to learn, that you can have a great product, but if you're not financially savvy, you're not going to make money. And even though I went to school for accounting, I hadn't figured it out, and I didn't do it as well as my dad did. And to be truthful, I didn't learn some things from my dad because we would disagree in a bunch of things. So even though I loved him and respect him dearly, his view on businesses were very different than mine. And granted, I should have listened to him, not think I know better. But so it was a struggle. It was a struggle. And it basically, I want to get out of it. And I would pray as a Christian, I would pray, Father, you have to change all these circumstances. I can't tolerate this. And then my prayer went to, Father, you have to change the circumstances or change me. And one of the things I didn't say, which is the most significant thing in my life, is my relationship to the Lord. I came to Christ when I was 14 years old. My parents, wonderful people, but they were not born again Christians. But a lady, a friend, took us to a Bible study. And in there's when I heard for the first time about Christ. And someone said to me, Mario, do you know that if you were the only person alive, Jesus still would have come and died on a cross for you? And Kale, when I heard that as a 14-year-old kid, I just surrendered to God. I really did. If you love me that much, God, I just give my life to you. And again, never a perfect person because there is no such things in the universe. There's no perfect people. But I have to say with genuine sincerity that my desire from that moment on has been to honor him. And I can say truly, I have never, ever this deliberately disobey something he said. I screw up, but never intentionally. Okay. Because we all screw up, but not intentionally. So I say that because this was significant to me, my relationship with him. And then I'm thinking, man, I have no peace. This is a pain in the neck. I'm supposed to experience peace that I don't see. I mean, the Bible talks about peace. I don't have any of it. What's going on here? Right.
Yeah.
So I would pray, change this. And then like I said earlier, the prayer change, not the circumstances, change me then. Something's got to give here. It's either the circumstances or I got to change. And something happened there, Kale, too. When that prayer, I started praying that, something that I did not do before, I started reading and reading positive thinking stuff, motivational thinkers. Zig Ziglar was one of the guys that I listened to a lot that the Lord used to truly change me. And basically what started to happening is all these new thoughts that came into my head were replacing the other thoughts, which were incorrect thoughts. Again, wrong expectations, wrong self-image. I thought that I really didn't know how to do this thing. I was too young. I got into it too young. I didn't finish school. All these things that we come up in our brains that we find out why we can't do this. We always focus on why we can't. Okay. So that kind of stuff was there. I started listening to these guys and something was happening. But by the way, I did go back to school though, because I figure I got to get out of this thing. Even though the process was happening there, I still thought I need to get out of school, out of this. So I went back to college. And then in the process of that, a lady, a realtor, commercial properties came to the restaurant in Hallandale and she liked this. She called me. She called the restaurant to see if we were interested in opening up another place. And truthfully, I forgot how many times she called. I think at least 3 times. I never wanted to even take the call because I was not interested in opening another one. I want to get out of them, not opening another one. All right. And truthfully, I just don't want to be rude anymore. So I took the call one time and I ended up going to the plantation where the plantation restaurant was, because we just moved recently. And something happened, Kale, which is incredible. I call it being born again, even though that doesn't happen because you're only born again one time. When I drove into the parking lot of the shopping center where the restaurant that we were going to look at was, Kale, without exaggeration, dude, something happened inside of me that in an instant, Mario was a transformed human being. Because what happened is everything that in my mind I dreamt about, what I thought a restaurant should be, where it should be, what it should look like. When I walked in there, that place represented all that. And when I say I changed. I literally in one instant, that's why I say it was like, I describe it as a Christian. It's not from born again spiritually, but born again mentally, born again in everything. But it took 1 second for that to happen. But in reality, it took multiple years of me preparing that, multiple years of me renewing my mind, multiple years of me changing and grabbing new things, not just living with what I had. And so many of us want to make decisions and improve things without any additional knowledge in their brain. We just think that we know it and we insist on certain things. So that changed me. And here's what happened. And it literally happened. The issues that I had before that event, which here are the issues, which they happen all the time in restaurants. I tell you, things break down on the weekends, which is the worst time to things happen, all these things. So I would deal with that and I would always get frustrated, like, why? When I came back, the same thing still happened. It just didn't bother me because my attitude, instead of complaining about it, I was like, I gotta just fix it. All right, we fix it. Let's fix it. And I became pretty good at figuring out what we needed to do. Let's just fix it. We fixed it. So all these things that used to bother me, the circumstances did not change. Mario changed. Okay. But here's the deal. When we opened up the new restaurant in Plantation, the circumstances were not the same because Mario changed. He produced different circumstances and it was totally different. Everything, it was like, that place was like, what? These things don't happen. And it didn't happen because a different mindset, a different approach on how to do this thing.
Mm.
And it literally changed it completely. And then a thing that really was another big thing in my walk with the restaurant, and I'll give you the whole spiel, and then we could talk a little bit. But unless you want to ask some questions, I don't want. I could talk a good amount, so you could interrupt me. You want to? I got more. I got more to say about the story, but you interrupt whatever you want.
Yeah, let's finish the restaurant story, and then we'll
Okay.
dive into some
Okay.
of this stuff, because there's a lot to unpack. Yeah.
Okay, because here's what happened when I went to the new restaurant. When I went to the new restaurant, things were going well, and then again, reading, I went to a place, I went to a Christian event. There was a little book. And by the way, most of the lives, I tell people, which is true, most of my life change from a book has been in one page of the book. It's not been the whole book. Okay. So I buy a book that is called The Soul of the Firm. And I'm reading this book, and I think it's like page 14 of the book. It shares the values of the company. And the company, it was Service Master, publicly traded company, and the values of the company that they had is, and they still have, to honor God in everything we do, to help those around us grow, to pursue excellence, and to grow profitably. Those were the 4 points. When I saw that and I read that, it impacted the heck out of me, because what it did is it gave language to something that I had in me, but I never had written or described it. I never did. But that it literally expressed everything that was in Mario's heart, but Mario had not put it into writing. So when that happened, I said, this is going to be our values here. But it took me a while for that to be brought out and shared with the staff, because I wanted to make sure that if those are our values, we will live by them. I wanted that to be the case. So we did do that. We put them out. And they've been the values that we've had for a ton of years. And they're very much the core of everything of Padrino's, because right now, that to me is the most important thing. When you have those values, when that becomes the culture of the company, for me right now, that is the greatest focus, is to ensure that we're living those things out. If we're living those things out, we will have a great outcome. And here they go. And I'll give you just briefly, to honor God in everything we do. I tell people, well, everyone who comes, I'm not trying to, by the way, we have a restaurant. We do not have a Christian restaurant. It's a restaurant that we happen to be Christian owners, meaning I'm not going to do a bunch of Christian things there in the sense of Christian music and that. If you want to do it, that's fine, but that's not the way we do it. However, when I tell people the first one, to honor God in everything we do, I say what that means is that we will have to act with integrity and we'll treat each other with respect. But for Mario, it truly means I want to honor God in everything I do. For you guys, this is what that means. And then number 2, to help those around us grow. We want everyone who shows up at Padrino's to leave better. We truly do. We want them to leave better. We hope that they've learned something, that it's better. And then to pursue excellence. We want things to be excellent, to glorify Him, to do things well done. And then to grow properly financially. So all these things fall, I think they go very well. And here's what I say. Number 1, to honor God in everything we do. I don't see these as 4 different points. I see this as 1 point, to honor God in everything we do. And how do we honor God? By helping those around us grow. To love your neighbor as yourself. How do we honor God? To pursue excellence. To let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. How do we do it? To grow profitably, financially. How is that? The parable of the talents. That we are given these opportunities and we must make the best out of it. So He would say, well done, good and faithful servant. So it's not 4 different things. It's only one thing, but we do it in that. So that's the whole thing of Padrino's here. And then the neat thing is, and I've ended up with this, and now I have 3rd generation. So let me just say, my contribution to this is, I would say, is putting those values, which were my parents' values too, in integrity and excellence, and that. Obviously, the aspect of putting the Lord there as the center and being vocal about it. That's my introduction to this. And then the beautiful thing, Kale, is that I have 3 children. They're all involved in the restaurant. They all have the same values. We're all on board. So it's not a forcing them to do this. They chose to be with us, with me and my wife in the business. We didn't brainwash them into you gotta do this kind of deal. So because of that, I am extremely grateful, my friend. So that's the picture. We could talk now, but that is the picture of where we are right now.
Yeah. No, it's that I love the story so much. So many great things. And yeah, I want to unpack some of it because there's so many cool things. So first off, I wanted to go back towards the beginning again, because you mentioned you started off from zero, right?
Zero.
Your father
Mhm.
sent you guys over here
Mhm.
first while he stayed in Cuba for a bit.
Mhm.
And then he came here with nothing. And I think people like myself growing up in America, I think we take a lot of things for granted, right? We have a bit of an entitled mentality. And it always impresses me, and I always admire people who take these grand measures, these drastic uprootings,
Mhm.
and turn them into something. I can't imagine going through something like that, or have to uproot my entire family and
Mhm.
send my wife and my kids to another country without me for
Mhm.
however. That just blows my mind, number
Mhm.
one.
Mhm.
So the sacrifices that it takes. And so I always admire that. And I know, or I'm pretty confident, that shaped a lot of who you became and those experiences. But I want to just touch on the root is that why your father sent you guys
Mhm.
ahead of him and in the first place, which at that time Cuba was going through some really troubling times and still is.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to see if you can maybe shed some light a little bit on what it really looks like in
Mhm.
this nation, because like we had chatted offline, and when we had met initially, there's an unfortunate movement in America, but frankly, much of the world, I think just in the Western world, of communism, or give its friendlier tagline of democratic socialism, or whatever you
Yeah.
want to call it. It's all the same thing, but it's becoming this pop culture icon almost.
Yeah.
And propaganda is a huge part of communism, and I think that's why. But I think a lot of people are subscribing to this idea and having absolutely no clue of what it really means. They hear the taglines, they think it means free stuff. Uh, Nothing is free.
That's
So I wanted to see if you can just
Yeah.
shed some light from your experience on what it
Yeah.
really means.
Yeah. Here's the thing, that it would be very sad. When I went to Cuba and I saw Cuba as an adult, the first thing I had was anger. It literally, I went 3 times. The second and third time I was more mellow, and it angered me because you see these structures and these buildings that you saw that they were beautiful at one time and now they're nothing.
Right.
If you go to Padrino's restaurant, we have a lot of pictures of my family, and they're black and white pictures. And I didn't put them up there to show my family. I put them up there to give a picture of what Cuba used to be. And if anyone looks at those pictures, you will say, what a nice place.
Mm.
What a good place. You go to Cuba now and it's horrific. There's nothing. Everything that was built is destroyed. And here's the thing about it, because here's the silliness of it all. And it happens in every place. Communism is so based on coveting other people's goodness. Rather than us being motivated to reach that level, what we want is to bring them down. That's the core of communism. That is
Mhm.
the core. And we have seen it. The countries are totally different. So my parents, I give them so much credit because let me tell you, it was a smaller minority who took that move early on.
Mm.
Because you know what? There's always going to be people that are wealthier than others. And you know what? A lot of times the ones on the bottom just are jealous of the top and they just want to bring them down.
Right.
So when that happens, yeah, and you start talking about it, yeah, that's awesome. I'm going to give you free this. I'm going to give you free medicine. I'm going to give you free education. And here's what I know for a fact, because I've seen it with my eyes. There's no free medicine. And here's the irony of it. Here's the irony of communism, Kale. The beautiful hotels, that there are a few of them, the Cuban people are not allowed to go in them. Is for the foreigners so they can make money. A lot of people say there's great medicine in Cuba. Apparently, some foreigners go to certain hospitals and have great medicine. The vast majority of people do not. This factually, we see it, we know it.
Mm-hmm.
Education. Okay, so everybody could read. When I say this, Cuban people prior to communism and Cuban people after communism do not speak the same language. It is horrific how we speak. first of all, I always say the people, the way they spoke Spanish and the people, the way they speak Spanish right now is like, what just happened here? It is horrific how we change. When I went back to Cuba, it broke my heart. I saw my aunt. I hadn't seen her in a long time. And I saw there's something about the people. And I'm not saying this to everybody because we're not saying generalizations, but in reality, there was like, they sucked their soul. You're walking around just to survive deal. And what changed that? What made that? Communism. The promise of giving you things that it's impossible to give you things. There's no motivation for anyone to do anything if you want to take it away from me to give it to someone else who's not doing anything. And that's where we're going. That's where we're going. It's heartbreaking and it kills me because, and by the way, we went back with a group of men, businessmen, sharp men. They went to Cuba. They were stunned. They had no clue. And these are business sharp people. So it's a subject or reality that no one even knows what it looks like. Even smart business people have no clue how terrible communism is. So it truly is something that it is horrific. And that's why it breaks our heart for us who experience the blessings of America. And the difference, I say this with all sincerity, that generation of Cubans that came over, it's not only the Cubans, because a lot of people, okay? So it's not immigrants. We have an advantage over Americans. Here's why. We come here because we believe dearly that America is the land of opportunity.
Right. Yeah.
Done. If you believe that, as opposed to America is, this is so bad, unfair, or whatever you want to add to it. Right. Once you do, that's where you're going to live. Mm. And it's obvious. That's why the renewing of this mind and knowing the good stuff knowing the truth really makes you different than. So anyway, that whole thing with Cuba and the communists, that's why they left. They were willing to sacrifice for the future of their children. And like I said, I witnessed it and experienced it when I went back as an adult, and I literally wept. I said, I know my life would have been so different if they hadn't taken that step.
Mm. Now, I'm curious, because all too often things don't become clear to us until hindsight. I guess, how old were you when you moved to the US?
I was 8 years old when I came over.
Okay. So did you have like an understanding of what was going on and why at that age?
No. Okay. And to be frank, at that age, my upbringing there was not that difficult, but here's the thing. My parents, business-wise, were very savvy. And here's unfortunately what happens in Cuba. Here's what happens to Cuba. You have to break government regulations, do your own thing on so you can survive.
Right.
And that's what they would do. They would do stuff, and not horrific stuff, but for example, they would sell hams. So it's not the worst sin in the world, but you make hams and you sell to people ham. And that's when I remember as a little kid, my parents having an oven in the back, which was not supposed to have it, selling ham so that you could survive. So right. my upbringing, and by the way, here's the other thing. Cuba wasn't as horrific as it is right now because the Soviet Union was just dumping money into it. Not because communism worked, but because the Soviet Union was dumping money into it. The minute Soviet Union pulled back, everything fell apart.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, it's just, I'm glad you shared that just because, I think people need to hear it. And it constantly blows my mind that it gained as much traction as it has when there's been literally not a single example of successful.
Not once. And we still insist on the darn thing. That would be, Cale, that reminds me of what I said, how we're ignorant or we just have whatever we know and we insist on changing our lives based on only what we just see here.
Yeah.
Here's what happens. We ignore what is and we just keep it. They ignore what is and they just think, no, this is going to work. 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 And yet ignore the realities of what's going on around.
Yeah.
And that's what we oftentimes do. We ignore out there. We don't realize that we got to change. It's not that's got to change. And we know we got to make that happen. We got to make that happen. And it doesn't happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And how you describe things, like I don't know, I guess probably about a decade ago or so now, I'd gone to Venezuela and I've done a lot of traveling throughout South America prior to that and since, and it was like you said, just very sad. You could see that it once was a great place, but everything was just run down. Everything was dirty, rolling blackouts, just you name it. But you could see what it once was.
Yeah.
And it was heartbreaking because the people were honestly probably some of the nicest people that I've ever met in my life, especially to me as a foreigner there, just super accommodating, super helpful, super protective. Just, it was amazing. I remember this just funny little story is that when I was leaving and flying back from Caracas, I was getting a sandwich from a shop in the airport. And so I had gotten a sandwich and it was delicious. So I was like, oh man, let me get another sandwich for the trip. And the second sandwich was taking forever to make. And just, man, oh man. And so finally I got it. And then I'm stepping out and I hear them calling my name over the intercom. Oh man, like I'm going to miss my flight. Now I'm like running down, trying to find the gate. And I get there. Nope, there's no more passengers there. Everybody is gone on the plane. And the lady who had checked me in at the baggage was standing there. And she saw me and she's, oh my gosh, like we were so worried about you. Like we were going to leave without you. I was like, you kidding? Any other place, any other day? Later. I was like, wow, like that always stuck with me. I was like, man, oh man, that's crazy. But yeah, I guess the point of it was just that it really is sad. You take such a beautiful thing, a beautiful nation, great people, and you just utterly destroy it with these mentalities, these programs, and these false promises. And I think people wake up to that.
Yeah. And unfortunately, what happens under that system, it changes human beings, how they change, how they think. Because let me say something, and this is this is not everyone, by the way, but it's more than it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
The Cubans who come over right now from Cuba do not have the same mindset that we had.
Right.
They come because they're already accustomed that the government has to give them things.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, we were on welfare when we came from Cuba. And here's the difference between that and now. And you know what happened? We were so happy to get a welfare. I still, as a punk kid, remember when we stopped being in welfare and I was so happy that we're no longer welfare.
Mm-hmm.
So welfare, when we were here back in the day, did what it was supposed to do, which just to give you a hand for a little bit so that you could get going. Now welfare has become like that's totally different. And that's two sets of different people. One living under communism where they're accustomed that it's the government's responsibility to take care of me.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one that comes over where it says it's not the government's responsibility. I'm grateful that they even give me a little hand.
Right.
It is my responsibility to make the most of it. So totally different mindsets.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. That's a very good point. So your father, I think the other cool thing is that your father eventually came over. And how long was it before your father?
4 years.
4 years.
4 years. Mm-hmm.
Did you guys see him at all during that time? Or
No, not at all. Nothing.
That's crazy. So he comes over and at 62 opens the restaurant.
Yeah.
And that's another just really important and inspiring thing to hear as well, because again, look at all that adversity and like you were talking about, no real plan, no whim, open a restaurant because he had the mentality, like you were saying, he's very business savvy, had the mentality. Yeah, I'm guessing I can make it happen thing.
Yeah. And
so many people are stuck in the mentality of, I guess I kind of call it the rat race of we need to be where we have a job and that's all that we can have. That's all we are, all we can do. And people are not willing to take a risk and step out of the box and try something else.
Yeah.
And I think we're ingrained to a lot of extent to have that mentality. And especially as we get older, we taught you can't do it.
Yeah.
You can't do anything now. It's too late. So I think that's just inspiring as well to, again, starting from scratch, moving to another country, opening up a business at 62 without a real plan, not in the restaurant industry originally, and just going out there and doing it and having that entrepreneur spirit. And I know that inspires me and I'm sure that'll inspire other people too, is because it really is never too late to make a change or to take a step and make a risk. And one thing I think about whenever I start thinking about these types of things is look at the examples in the scripture and look at how old Moses was before he was called to lead the people out. He was 80 years old. Joshua, he was 80 years old and he took over for Moses. And so you look at all these different examples in scripture, and you can see that we don't mentally we don't mentally die when we 40 or 50 or 60 or whatever. And so many people just, I think, give up.
Yeah.
And there's so much potential that you can have to really do something great. So I think that's a wonderful, wonderful testimony to that.
Now, let me say something here to that, because one of the things that was helpful for us, because again, we started with nothing. And one of the things about that first generation, Cale, is here's the deal. And here's something amazing about, I'm so happy, grateful about our culture. We stick together. We're together. We help each other. Because remember, in order to get this thing done, the first business that we opened, my mom, we have family. She went by each house, I don't know how many houses, but multiple houses, collecting money from them so that we could get started. The one thing about starting something that I say to people, we could start, but there's a support system that we had. When we opened up the restaurant later in Broward County, we had a bunch of family working in there, because I'm realizing, how do we pull that off? Because we had a lot of family that was willing to help. So without any doubt, that help from the family, if we didn't have that, I'm not sure how that would have looked like. I don't know how it would have looked like, because for every beginning, we had family help. So that, I find that extremely essential in the formula. And sometimes we want to do things and we might not have that support, and that's where it gets a little more tricky. Because remember, there's a period usually when you're starting something new for a couple of years, 3 years, that you're just struggling through it. And the family contribution is what helped us, I believe, getting through those years with obviously excellence and financial savvy. So it's not just you got a bunch of people working for you. You got to have the business savvy and the excellence side.
Yeah. Yeah. You bring up a good point, because whether it's family or just your network, community.
Yeah, your network, exactly.
Having some type of community or support system in place.
100%.
And for me, that's, I'm a gringo, but I love the Latin culture. And one of the reasons is because of that, very family oriented, very close, versus especially me, I'm from the Northeast, Yankee culture, very, very independent. You do your own thing type of stuff.
Yeah.
You do your own thing and you keep quiet.
Yeah.
It's a great contrast for me, but I really admire that about the Latin culture in specific. But it speaks so true, because anybody taking an entrepreneurial journey, and I certainly experienced this, is that it can very easily become very lonely, especially if you're coming from W-2 world or a regular job, where a lot of those people that perhaps were your friends at the time go by the wayside real quick.
Yeah.
When they see you have a different mindset about things now. And so it can be very detrimental. And so that's why, like, one thing that I always tell people is, if you're going to go down the entrepreneurial journey, 2 big things. One is you have to have really strong why, or a reason that you're doing it.
Very much so.
Because when the things get tough, and they will, your default reaction is going to be, I want to throw in the towel, right? Easier thing to do, go back to what I was doing before, right? And it's so easy to do that. It really is. And then the next is build up and have that network. And whatever form it may be even a virtual network. Honestly, like I leverage that a lot through social media and the real estate world, is because a lot of what I do in the real estate is remote anyway. So we build remote communities of like-minded people and share experiences, share challenges, share struggles, share successes, the thing, but just having that community of people that you can relate to now on the path that you're going down is just tremendously helpful.
Essential. Essential. By the way, I didn't say it earlier, but the reason that I lingered those 10 years, even though I was struggling, is because of my mother. She would say to me, Mario, it's going to get better. And I trusted her. Mario is going to get better. That's what kept me so that's why this network or this community, whether it's family or friends or someone, but you do need people around you. If you're on your own, like you say, it's very easy to bail out. I'm telling you, I would have bailed out if it wasn't for Mario. It's going to get better.
Yeah.
That alone kept it going.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was the other thing too, that because that when you were told that at that meeting, that story, that really spoke to me because again, the other part of it is you can oftentimes feel like you're the only one going through those challenges or those thoughts and when you spoke about that, I was like, that really spoke to me because I was like, man, I'm finding myself in that season a little bit.
Just, I think everybody does it. Everybody, I can't imagine everybody not going through it, to be honest.
Yeah. And yeah, so hearing that, I was like, you know what?
Mhm.
Okay, maybe it's not just me. This is part of the process.
It's part of the process. It truly is.
You know, it will get better. And so that really did encourage me when you had spoken about that.
It's part of the process.
Yeah. And because I think we do, just like you were talking about as well, we do get into this entrepreneurship thing with oftentimes very different expectations of what it can be or what it is, especially initially.
Mhm.
When you're wearing all the hats, doing what you got to do, sleeping at the restaurant, things don't look as glorious as you probably had pictured in your head, right? But if you can have that hope and seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, so to
Yeah.
speak, and that can keep you going, and then you can finally get there and can look back and be grateful for that experience.
Definitely. But again, seeing that and knowing that makes a difference. I'll share something with you about that to me, seeing my parents work, that they will do whatever it took to happen is this formula, but you got to see somebody. I heard someone said better than hearing, it's not someone, it's my proverb. I told you, a Chinese proverb, better than hearing something 100 times is seeing it once.
Mm.
I saw my parents live out a life of whatever it took. We opened up a restaurant in Orlando right before, it's in 207, right before the recession hit, literally months before. And so what ended up happening is the restaurant was going down. We have partners up there and nice guys that work with us, but partners, they never owned a restaurant or anything. They were just bottom line. And ended up, that thing was just draining us financially because I was the guy who was putting most of the money in. So my wife and I moved to Orlando for 1 year because I said, this is not going to go down. We got to do whatever it takes. And she and I lived up there for 1 year, working like we hadn't worked in a long time. But I saw my parents' attitude. We do whatever it takes. And that place turned around and became very good. Let me put it this way. So that idea of doing whatever it takes, but you need to experience it or see it from people so that you know what that looks like. What does it look like? Whatever it takes. I'll move to another city and live there for a year so that we could get this thing going and work hours that I haven't been working, but we'll do whatever it takes. That's the deal.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. I love it. And the other thing that had really spoken to me when you had given your talk was, and you shared with us here, was about the values and how that really transforms your business and shapes it currently. And in particular, having that first value, honor God in everything that you do. And the last one being grow profitably. Usually that's the first one.
Yeah.
Usually that's the first one. But I think you found the formula to success, which God's word has given us the whole time. God first and all the rest will be given to you.
Yeah.
We like to skip over that part.
Yeah.
And again, I really love that because again, just so many things were speaking to me because I found myself in a season, again, with my business of trying to find what is because I went into it with that initial lot of grow profitably, right? It was a financial motivation to start the business. But as it grows and evolves, I've been searching for what is the next step though, because this just being about growing profitably, again, like we know inherently, but choose to ignore is not, what's the word? Is not, my gosh, I'm having a blank here. Not satisfactory, but it's not, goodness gracious.
That's fine. I'm glad.
Not fulfilling. So yeah, if you're just doing it for that end means, it's not a fulfilling thing. And so searching for what is going to be the next step, what is going to be ultimately the mission and the purpose behind the business and these values. Again, I was like, that's where it needs to be. Number one, it needs to be reordering the priorities of things. And I think things will fall into place after that. And I don't know if this falls in line with that first value of honor God in everything you do, or in your integrity and respect, and if it's even intentional, or if you even notice. But one of the other things that kind of stood out to me was when we at that meeting was when I walked in. You guys were all sitting around the table anyway. I didn't know who you were at first, or anybody there. And I walked in and it started saying hi, and you stood up to shake my hand. And most other people just will sit down, and then I say, oh, this is Mario. He's the owner here. So here's a successful businessman who has no idea who I am, right? But he shows a sign of respect regardless by a simple act like that. Stand up and shake hands and acknowledge, right? And I don't know if that's intentional, or if you even notice that you do that, or what, but when you laid out those values, I was like, yeah, like that makes sense.
I'm glad that happened. And I would imagine that it is my heart that hopefully that happens every single time, because ultimately, the older I get, the more obvious it becomes that our mission on earth is to impact people for his glory. That's it. Everything else is secondary. That is the only mission. And then the business becomes, the older I get, the more the business becomes a vehicle to impact people for his glory, to draw him. And not everybody's going to be a God believer, but that is the mission, more so than anything else. We're literally spending a lot of time on that, training, management. And I think by God's grace, it's going to happen. You're going to see a big thing with Padrinos, because it's become so real that to them, I tell them, and they're not Christians. Some of them are, not all of them. If our focus is to help those around us grow, which basically is to love your neighbor as yourself, which is the ultimate. Christianity, it just boils down to two things: love the Lord with all everything you got, and love your neighbor as yourself. Done. You do those two and you got it covered. And when you do that, my friend, everything else falls into place. But obviously, you got to do all the other stuff. But that being that motivation, that's a life changer when you realize that we're here to impact people for God's heart. Done.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And I know we're getting towards the end here, and I want to be respectful of your time as well. But I wanted to touch on at least one more important. And you talked about your prayer, and your prayer changing from change the circumstances to change me. And that again is where we so oftentimes get stuck. Man, it's so much easier to just want the situation to change and think and hope that everything else will be better after that. It is very hard to ask to be changed and to actually change yourself. And of course, God's hands, to be successful with that, I think God's hand needs to be in that, because just our human nature is going to be, again, default to the easy route, which is staying the same, in our same mode, our same mentality, the same everything, versus taking the difficult step. So I'm just curious, when you, and maybe you already answered the question a little bit, but when you change that prayer to change me versus change the circumstances, was there, I know you mentioned like some of the mental positivity things that you had started going down, but was there any like pivotal thing or pivotal moment that really put you over that hurdle finally of, okay, that was enough. It's me. I set you down that path.
Yeah, I don't recall that. I really don't. I think it is, I'm not sure. I guess the Holy Spirit literally put that in my heart, because I don't recall anything in that way. And somehow that prayer came about. Okay, somebody's got to change here. It's either circumstances or me, Lord. But that's it. But it's interesting how it didn't change until that prayer, because it took a long time, dude. I mean, I wonder if I would have prayed that earlier, it would have happened much earlier. Okay. It took a long time, right? And I'm sure, I'm not sure, maybe it's grace allowed me to even come up with the prayer of thinking that way, because I don't know what made it be. But now that I think about it, darn it took a long time. If I would have prayed that earlier, it would have been done. But yeah, but it was the transformation was changing me, and it's always us. That's the whole point. By the way, in life, we always think that success is reaching the goal,
Mm,
but the reality, the goal is being transformed in the process, is not reaching a goal. The success is the transformation that happens in the process. Is the process itself is not the point. We think of it of reaching just the point, and once you get to the point, what are you going to do? Then, okay, come on, well, another point. Where in reality, that's not the reality of us as believers. Is how do we do the process? That's
mm,
the goal. Now,
mhm.
how do we get to the end point? The end
Right.
point is just let's take this again. I'm in the restaurant business, guy. Not because I love restaurants. I told you, I'm in the restaurant business because my parents had all that work. Not like I had a dream. I want to have this great restaurant. I've told you, I can't even cook. Okay. So it's not even, so it's not like I could cook and I want to feed people awesome food. No,
Right.
I'm in the restaurant business to honor my parents' hard work. Done. But I
Mm,
want to do it well to honor him in the process. That's
yeah.
part of the deal. So I think when we think about the process being the goal, not the end point, obviously we gotta have a direction. So I'm not saying you just randomly just go everywhere. You gotta have a direction. There's no doubt you gotta have a direction. But it's sometimes too, by the way, and this is not sometimes when we put the goal as the goal and the main point, I see when as Christians we hurt other people on the process to get to that end,
Mm,
which that's not at all God honoring. We have to have the direction, undoubtedly. We got to have the vision, undoubtedly. But the main thing is how do we go about it?
mm.
Not that we reach that point.
Yeah. No, that's
That's
very
the walk. That's the Christian walk. Done. That's it. We're going to be here to be in the process, reflect Him and glorify Him.
mm,
Not by reaching the goal, I glorified Him.
mm.
It's in the process. How do I do it?
Hmm. Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. Yeah, because again, hit that goal.
What are you going to do? Come up
Yeah.
with another one.
Exactly. That's
Is
it.
that enough? Let me get to a bigger one.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, I did whatever. Okay, great. Now let me go to a bigger goal.
Yep.
Okay, no, let me go to another bigger goal.
Yep.
So that can never be satisfaction. Can't be that.
Right.
Satisfaction has to be the daily life on how to get there, to honor Him in the process. By the way, the older I get, the more that becomes my thoughts. By the way, I know I'm older. When you're younger, you have different thoughts, but undoubtedly, it's all about the day. How do I do it? And when I say glorify, sounds okay. Am I like, oh, I'm going to glorify God? No, it's how do I kind to people and patient and respectful. And it's not that even that complicated and forgiving and these things, which they're difficult inside, but not complicated terms.
Right.
Is, yeah, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's the deal.
Yeah. Isn't again, it just goes back to our fallen nature and the great deceiver. And
Mhm.
just like you said, that what we need to do, be kind, be respectful, and be loving.
Mhm.
Probably the simplest things out there.
Mhm.
But for us internally, they're probably the hardest things to do.
Undoubtedly.
And it's just so frustrating, honestly.
It is.
It really is of how hard it is to do those simple things. Like just Christ told us.
Yeah. And and the irony of it is that in pursuing our goal, we usually violate those simple things.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Ugh, well, only in this fallen state for so long, thankfully.
That's the beautiful thing. Perspective is everything, my friend. Remember, Jesus came that we may have eternal life, not that we may have a cushy life on this
Yeah.
earth.
Yes.
Remember that.
Another very
That you're talking about bad perspectives and bad expectations. A lot of us come to Jesus so that He could give us a cushy life, when that's not what He came for. He came that we may have eternal life, meaning, He said, in this world you will have trouble. So
That's-
again, bad perspectives they lead you to disappointment.
Yeah. No, 100%. Oh, well, I love this. I love this conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your experience and everything with us, Mario. And we like to wrap it up with just leaving our audience with three actionable or practical tips based on what we talked about.
Yeah. I was thinking about that, and I only came up with the one that changed my life. Here's the one. Do you truly believe what you say you believe?
Mm.
For us to really think that through, for us who are believers, for those who are, for any person that will apply. But that is the life changer of all life changers for us who are Christians. Do we truly believe what we say we believe? And I am pretty confident that most of us do not believe what we say we believe, because the evidence that we believe is that we act according to what we believe.
With spirit. Yeah.
And that is the life changer right there. For all of us who are believers, I think that is the question that we all need to ask. I had to ask myself, and I discovered in myself that I did not. And I'll give you an example. Back in the day, when I was going through the difficult time in the restaurant, I would go to my mother whenever I was really going through a difficult time that I did not know the answer to it. And this was not something I did every week or anything like that. Okay. So I could handle things on my own, but occasionally I would have to go to her. And here's what would happen, Cale, and this is what changed my life. I'm praying. This is some years ago, not that many years ago, already as me growing up Christian. And I remember as I'm praying, I recall when I would go to mom and present the situation, the problem, I would walk away with tremendous peace. She got it covered. I'm done. Good. I'm praying and I'm walking away from my Lord and my God, the creator of the universe, my Father who already demonstrated his love for me beyond any demonstration. And I walk away with the same burden that I brought to him. And that changed my life. That changed my life. Do I truly believe what I say I believe? And I did not, because I say that I trusted him, but I didn't. The word for us as Christians, do you truly trust him? Not do you believe, because you could believe all kinds of things. You could believe that you got a movie star that you believe he exists because you know he's there, but do you even know the guy? Do you even trust? You can't trust him unless you know him.
Right.
So that word trust is what changes everything. So what I leave for everyone is, do you truly believe? And I'm talking about as Christians and even non-Christians, whatever you believe, because a lot of stuff we say we believe that we don't believe. We just blab it out. But for us Christians, the life-changing question for all of us should be, do I truly believe what I say I believe? And really have an honest answer to that question.
Man, leave us on a cliffhanger like that.
Have an honest answer to that question, and then determine what you're going to do with your life. Is it yes with Jesus all in or not? There's no in between. It's either yes or no. There's no in between.
Yeah. No lukewarm, man. Wow. Thank you again. Thank you very much for your insights and your time and everything. And if people want to find out more about you or about Padrino's, I guess why don't you give us where the locations are?
Yeah. Because I don't have I'm not social media or any of that stuff. So if you want to get a hold of me, I guess I can give you my email, but I don't have anything else. But we have locations in Plantation, in Hallandale Beach, Dania Beach, Boca Raton, and something in Fort Lauderdale. So we have 5 locations. So primarily in Broward County, but one in Boca Raton, West Boca.
Right. There you go. Visit one of the Padrino's restaurants and ask for Mario. Maybe you'll get lucky. There we go. Excellent. Again, appreciate it. Love it. Really great insights. And ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned next week for another episode of The Fit Investor.
Thank you for the opportunity, Cale. Thank you.